Hello and welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. UNESCO has voiced concern after shelling struck Lviv's historic center, a World Heritage Site. While the organization stopped short of assigning blame, it reaffirmed that international conventions safeguard such sites. The incident raises urgent questions about enforcement and accountability under international law. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack these legal dimensions is Andrea Matačić Cayley, Executive Director at the Center for Law and Global Affairs, an expert in international legal frameworks as well as cultural protection. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
So if you can help us straighten this out, when a UNESCO site is hit, is that automatically a war crime, or do we need to turn to things like intent or some other factors?
Yeah, you do have to look at the whole framework. So the 1954 convention gave the original protection to cultural heritage, and it is what is the law behind all of the prosecution, organization of accountability for these crimes. In addition, though, there are restrictions. For example, a cultural heritage site cannot be used for any military purpose. So under that that restriction, it's required to show that the object was used solely for cultural heritage purposes.
Right now, you mentioned the 1954 Hague Convention. UNESCO also cited the 1972 World Heritage Convention as well. Which one really matters most in cases like the one in Lviv?
So in this current instance with Ukraine, 1954 is what we're applying. Russia is not a signatory to any other Hague Convention, only 1954. However, we also have other laws which apply. Firstly, Ukrainian law itself. Ukraine has its own war crime statutes and war crimes laws, so it is possible for Ukraine to prosecute these crimes under that. Additionally, which also protects cultural heritage. And additionally, in January of 2025, Ukraine signed the Rome Statute, which adds this increased protection for everything. It allows much further charging than was allowed under Ukrainian law. So, for example, this attack, if it can be shown that it's part of a policy by Russia, it can prove that this is in fact persecution and a crime against humanity against the Ukrainian people.
Right, so this is all well and good, but UNESCO actually stopped short of naming Russia. What does this sort of the caution tell us? Is this a diplomatic caution, or is it really a weakening accountability?
No, UNESCO's not, its purpose is not accountability. It is recognizing what is cultural heritage, enhancing its protection. In the former Yugoslavia, UNESCO did play a role in accountability because it had experts on the ground during attacks. So these experts began to monitor the damage. They testified about the damage. In this instance, however, UNESCO can't come out. I don't think anybody can come out and say specifically that Russia is culpable until there is an investigation. And that is normal for all, not just, a statement by UNESCO, but hypothetically, if the International Criminal Court was following this, they would also have to wait until all of the investigation is completed.
Right. Now, another tricky thing about these international law is always in enforcement. Beyond statements, inspections, is there any concrete enforcement tools that actually exist when these sort of cultural heritage site is being attacked?
Yes. So enforcement is getting the site investigated immediately. Just last year, the Ukrainian military established a cultural protection unit within their military, which is an amazing step for them. So I would assume that these guys are going to be going on the ground and investigating what happened. Investigations involve not just sort of photographs of damage, but measurements. So you can determine specifically what the range of the ballistics, who could have been culpable based on the details. And all of this is, of course, increased with the use of technology and AI, which really allows precise determination. But once that happens, Ukraine has a right, and Ukraine has been since the war, been advised by a joint US, EU, UK group called the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group that has been assisting and helping them in determine how to apply international law in the cases of war crimes. So the next step would be, once the investigation is complete, for the Prosecutor General's office to determine who is the most responsible for this and to issue a notice of suspicion.
All right, and what happens after that notice of suspicion if we do find culprit or actually assign responsibility, culpability? Do we see anyone thrown in the slammer, or is it just some kind of fine? What eventually happens? So how is accountability being carried out?
So in an ideal circumstance, they would be able to arrest the individuals who are culpable. Unfortunately, it's not likely that they are in Ukraine, just based on the attack that was done by drones. So that would be, they have the possibility of doing an absentia trial. There is also the hope that there's going to be international prosecutions of these attacks on cultural heritage, in which case the International Criminal Court would get that dossier, and there will be a new court for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. So all of this can be prosecuted internationally. It can be prosecuted within Ukraine. Additionally, finally, it can also be prosecuted in national jurisdictions. So if one of these individuals who are culpable for these crimes and who are named by Ukraine is, for example, on vacation in France or has a property in Italy, they can be arrested in those countries and prosecuted under universal jurisdiction, which means a jurisdiction which allows the prosecution of the most heinous crimes.
All right. Now, there's also a complication when it comes to who is really culpable, right? We do know, well, at least the main suspect is the Russian military, but that's kind of a pretty broad term. Russian military, what does that even mean? If we wanted to hold someone accountable, who should that someone even be?
So you're going to look first at who's the person closest to the crime. So who was the person organizing this drone attack? This will be looking through military orders. I'm sure the Ukrainian military is able to do intercepts, so intercept conversations between the Russian military. So they would find the military officer who is the most directly involved in this attack. From there, they would look at Russian military orders and Russian legislation to see where he falls within the hierarchy. So if he was reporting and was under the command of somebody more senior, a senior general in Russia, and then let's say the Minister of Defense of Russia, you can, if you have the legislative positions established in Russian law, and you have the on-the-ground military orders, as well as the conversations and any sort of inside witnesses potentially who could establish how far up in the chain of command the Ukrainians or the international courts can prosecute.
All right. Last but not least, we do have a little bit of time. I want to ask you, do you think that if there's a stronger response or this response to the attack on Lviv can set a precedent for protection of cultural heritage site everywhere else during wartime if this is indeed being pursued more diligently?
Yes, I do. I would love to see the Ukrainians immediately start looking at doing a notice of suspicion for this crime and potentially going towards an indictment. One of the things to remember with this current war in Ukraine is that Russia historically has always had cultural heritage destruction as a policy. Unlike what we saw in the former Yugoslavia or in other countries where it was sort of this lashing out by the Serbian forces against the Muslim or Croat cultural heritage site, Russia has as a policy the destruction of cultural identity. So why is this church symbolic and this monastery? It was part of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, which has broken away further and further from the Russian Orthodox Church. And then we have additionally the fact that at the same time as they're attacking churches, there's pillaging of Ukrainian museums, archaeological sites, and these materials are being taken to Russia and being re-identified as returned Russian heritage. So the policy that's going on right now in Ukraine is exceptional for the prosecution of cultural heritage. And I would hope that this horrible attack, if anything comes out of it that is positive, is that it increases an awareness and it also gets the Prosecutor General's office to react immediately to these attacks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for helping us untangle all of that. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TV World.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.